All right, I got 1 o'clock. Let's get started on time so we can end on time. We're looking at a 30-minute session is what I understand. Today's topic is, are you going to be profitable in 2023? It comes up a lot in conversation. I got Stacy is on with us and Jason. I'm looking forward to having this back and forth dialogue, but it comes up often. And I say absolutely. I mean, what choice do you have? What option do you have other than to be profitable in 2023? But I also, are we talking about money? Are we talking about mindset? Are we talking about our relationships? I think it's everything. I mean, you just got to pull the trigger and absolutely be profitable in 2023. And when it comes up in conversation, we're usually talking about literally the money, literally the production, or the two components that I really like to play around with is, are your employees highly engaged? And are they interested in being part of the team and the tribe? And are the people who you are selling your product to, whatever that might be, are they heavily engaged and heavily involved in the profit process and interested in also being profitable? So it's a conversation around surrounding yourself with the right team is some of the component, but it's all around engagement in my mind. And engagement is the key component to being highly profitable in both the emotional space as well as the money space, if those are the two directions that we're looking at. The Gallup poll says that somewhere between 450 and $500 billion, maybe even $550 billion will be lost due to unengaged staff inside of our country. That's stealing, lying, showing up late, punching in late, punching out early, just flat out faking injuries, right? All of these components that will just not doing their job, it will combine to $500 to $550 billion lost in this country. And those are real numbers. That breaks down to somewhere between 2,500 and 10,000 per employee, right? I don't know the exact number, but it's significant. So if we can make sure that we continue to address the engaging piece and we can save that money, that is also going to help our bottom line. So there's multiple components here and we'll toss them back and forth. But for me, a couple of the key ones, and Stacy, if you can jump in here shortly, is the effective communication. Communication has always been an issue, whether we're talking about relationships or we're talking about dealing with our staff in general, right? The complete the people first mentality. And the environment that I work with in mining and construction, there's a lot of men in that industry, and the communication process is very, very bad. Men are poor communicators, generally speaking. So we have a lot of conversations about communication. So effective communication is a key component. Connection and synergy. This would be the tribe-like mentality. When you have a tribe-like mentality inside your organization with highly engaged leadership and highly engaged staff, you will tend to be far more profitable and retain your employees and retain your customers at a much higher level. And then maybe third in line is around the accountability and the extreme ownership, is holding each other accountable, ourselves as well as them. So those are a couple of the key components that I see that we can volley back and forth here.
Yeah, for sure. And, when we take a look at, the accountability piece, which we'll get more into, it's a little bit about, let's look back and where have we been at if we do some self-reflection as a part of accountability, and what did 2022 look like for you, and how do you take that data and use it to your advantage to work on the areas you need to work on for 2023. So, the goal here is to engage your staff. And when we have engaged staff, we have less injuries, we have better retention, and the topic of today is we have greater profitability. So in breaking down the three areas that Scott had mentioned, the golden nuggets, we like to call them, of effective communication, accountability, and some connection and synergy, those are the tools or the actionable items that we want to share with you as to the things you can take away from today's call to work on the engagement piece and make 2023 profitable and safer and have better retention rates.
Yeah, so this could be, Stacy, a big deal moving forward. And a lot of people claim that it's going to be a bigger deal in 2023, or the age of the workforce that we're working with. You and I have chatted about it. I know Jason's on and we'll jump in here at some point as we get moving, but I don't know as if it's really ever changed, and it doesn't really matter, right? It's a balance of just life. We're working with different ages of people, different generations, different type of work. It's just life, and it's the balance, and it's the It's this emotional intelligence piece that everyone needs to be really good, get good at from the neck up type conversation.
Yeah, and I don't think there can be a time more significant than the times that we're facing now to talk about emotional intelligence and talk about the ways in which we can get people more engaged, the world that we live in with the things that we've seen in the last few years, and just the general state of things. The area we need to spend our time and resources on is all about this emotional intelligence leadership training. And that's why we dive deep into it. And we feel that this is the answer to, the organizations that we work with when we talk about safety and profitability going hand in hand. You have anything to add into that, Jason? I know it's an area that you feel strongly about when we talk about sort of the state of the world.
Yeah, I don't think you have to make too much of an argument to reinforce the need for creating a more emotionally intelligent workforce or a more emotionally intelligent culture. I think everyone gets it. I think there's just this natural experience of that's polarizing that exists because of what we consume out in the world in the social media space. And I think that, as you said, I think when you look at profitability, can we afford to work on this as a company? I don't think we can afford not to in 2023. This is a topic and an approach to business that we cannot afford to ignore.
Right. So to jump into emotional intelligence, I think it's always helpful, and we like to rely on a little bit of, let's look and break down, digest the actual definition when we talk emotional intelligence, because it is a heavy word. It's really the ability to manage and understand and navigate your emotions and help others in your organization, manage their emotions. And that's the key to making deeper connections. It's the key to a more effective communication and resolving conflict. I like to refer to it as understanding and having tools available to have control over, emotional reactivity, I guess is the term that I would put out there. So if we look at our first nugget here in effective communications, it's all about understanding this emotional intelligence piece. So how do I better facilitate someone's communication? It's by understanding the ways in which their brain works. It's understanding in the ways in which they need to have their needs met when we talk about esteem and belonging. So it plays a role into everything that we talk about in regard to leadership and synergy and connection among your team. A lot of it, when we talk emotional intelligence, is about getting out of your comfort zones. So when we look at communication difficulties, right, a lot of people would refer to having difficult conversations and their avoidance of that because they don't have the tools or the strategies to go in and navigate the emotions that are involved in a difficult conversation. So if we have those tools and we understand the brain science behind it, we're stepping out of our comfort zone, which could be this avoidance space, right? Because it's easier to avoid it. It's easier not to feel uncomfortable and have the conversation and put tools into action and do this growing. But it's the area that we all need to be comfortable in. It's being comfortable in uncomfortable situations that we need to constantly train. And we always like to refer back to sort of the physical training piece of it. If you want to get in better shape, you have to train with intensity, duration, and frequency. And the same rules apply when we talk about training your emotional intelligence.
Yeah, good analogy.
Yeah, I think that slide, if you go back to that quick, Stace, I think that slide, the comfort zone is essentially the couch, right? With your favorite vice, whether it's Oreo cookies or pizza. And I think that you're in that comfort space when you're on the couch, and then your fear zone might be like the narrative you create. I don't have enough time. I don't want to get hurt. It's, that you just have this reason for why you're not working out, even though you should. So there's this comfort and fear space. And I think what we're doing well with a lot of the groups that we're working with is putting people in the learning zone. So they're getting to the gym. If we keep stretching this analogy out, they're getting to the gym. They're seeing some of the benefits. They're starting to really believe in the value of doing the work. But ultimately, we got to get them to that outer edge where they've grown or they're growing, and that's where they're actually going to be their best selves. And you're going to start to see some of the, benefits of kind of pushing people into this emotional intelligence growth zone. And that's like fitness, right? That's when you're the most fit. And I like to say emotionally shredded or emotionally buff, because you're putting on those muscles in your brain.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's where the brain science of the chemical really come in to make sure that we can understand how we're going to be able to push into these different zones, which I know is a space that Stacy likes to spend a lot of time in, and I'm hoping we can get to some of that as well.
Yeah, so if we can share with you, I mean, effective communication is such a huge topic. We could spend 3 hours on it. But what if I wanted to pull out a few nuggets that you can take away in our half hour that we have with you? I think the most basic is understanding, the brain science behind it. So a lot of difficult conversations or avoidance of difficult conversations comes from the fact that we're in this fear state or the fight, flight, or freeze state because of where our brains are at. And when we talk about understanding and being able to have better control over people's emotions or the emotional reactivity, that's the key in having effective communication in these situations. So we like to share when we present on any topic in leadership a little bit about what happens within the brain when we talk about this fight, flight, or freeze state. And it's that stress zone where literally the ability to have deep thinking, rational decision making in a calm state is completely disabled when we're in a fight, flight, or freeze state. And that's our limbic brain. That goes back to caveman days, where our brains were designed to put us in this heightened awareness, focus zone where we could, outrun that saber-toothed tiger. Now, we don't live in caveman days anymore, but our brains haven't evolved where we can decipher between physical threat of a saber-toothed tiger or an emotional conversation. So we have the same reaction, whether we're talking about emotions or physical fear of something in our environment. So we need to understand that, and the fact that our brains have sort of this, disabling component to them when we're in this state, and how do we use tools and how do we use that knowledge to then better get someone or ourselves into a higher cortex state where our brains have the ability to do that deep thinking, rational thought, because that's where the communication piece is going to come in. I can't have an effective conversation with somebody when they're in their limbic state, but I can if they're, sort of I've controlled those emotions. I've got them back down to baseline where now we can bring in some deep thinking and rational thought to the conversation to have it effective, and ultimately to have, the goal of the desired outcome, which is if we're dealing with a safety issue or we're dealing with an issue of working with somebody, we need to have a goal or an outcome of that, and we need to have the brain in the right state.
Yeah,
So,
on that last, the one point you made me think of, Stace, and I think it is worth sharing, is you talked about deeper thinking, rational thought. That's where trust, that's where collaboration, that's where creativity, that's where, efficiency and productivity live. And I saw being rational and being able to think deeply. Also, it's allowing us in that, low emotion, higher functioning state, that blue state, where we can collaborate, right? We can be our best creative selves. So it's one thing not to be a rageaholic, but it's another thing to be really creative and collaborative and strategic with your team. And ultimately, so it's not necessarily talking people out of like being hyper emotional, it's talking them into being hyper creative and hyper collaborative.
Yeah.
So to give you two takeaways as far as how we're going to use or what we're going to try to invoke when we're talking about getting that brain out of the fight, flight, or freeze into the rational thought area, is to know and understand two chemicals, actually three chemicals. So the oxytocin and serotonin chemicals that our bodies produce are going to be the chemicals that we want to focus on, and how do we invoke those and produce those in ourselves and in others, right? And if we talk oxytocin, it's affectionately referred to as the hugging drug, right? Because it's released in situations where we have physical contact with others, or we have a feeling of deep connection, trust, and we bring trust back into the equation. So we need to, as leaders or as, co-workers, understand the chemical oxytocin, because we need to create situations that are going to produce these chemicals within each other, within one another on our team. So I need someone to feel trust in me. So how do I create that trust? And we'll get into that a little bit when we talk connection and synergy at the tail end of this conversation. But it's making connection with somebody and creating that bond of trust, getting that brain into the executive state. Serotonin, same thing. It's produced with things like support, praise, recognition, right? If I'm acknowledging you, I'm saying things to you and supporting you, and I'm showing you that I recognize you and see you, our brains will produce serotonin. And that's the same, sense when we talk about the importance of praise and acknowledgement, or making somebody feel like they belong, right? We're pack animals, so we need to feel that we belong to the pack. It's all about trying to induce and create serotonin among the team.
Yeah.
And we can get into it. And again, this could be a whole area of itself, but when we talk about praise and recognition, we want to be mindful of praising in all different situations. So we can praise for a great outcome, right? But more importantly, we need to be aware and recognize and praise for the times that are tough too. So we want to praise the process, because a lot of times our brains go into that limbic state when things start to go bad, the job starts to have these hiccups. We need, as leaders, to be aware of the ability to produce serotonin and oxytocin in those situations where times get tough, to keep our brains moving in the direction of staying in the executive state, keeping things on the track, on the rails. Because the opposite is true. When we're in that stressed state and when things start to go off the rails, then the chemical we're talking about, the brain chemical, is cortisol. And cortisol is designed to put us in fight, flight, or freeze. It's designed to keep us alive, and it actually will shut down things that aren't necessary, right? So people will argue all the time and say, in a conversation with someone difficult that's in a heightened emotional state, I feel like they can't even, hear what I'm saying to them, or I feel like I'm showing them something and how to do it, and they're not even paying attention or watching me. And all of those statements are true, because cortisol actually reduces our visibility. It puts us in sort of a tunnel vision, and it also affects, the way in which we hear and the things that we filter out, because we don't need to hear all the chatter behind us. We need to be focused on outrunning that saber-toothed tiger, that threat. So just a lot of information at once, but 3 takeaways in understanding oxytocin, serotonin, and cortisol, and how that plays into the limbic and executive states. And then, all of that unfolds as far as if I'm in my executive state and I've got the tools to invoke those chemicals within myself and within others, then I have a better game plan when we talk about communication among the team.
Yeah, good stuff. An absolute must know, Stace. I agree 100%. And most of us in an adult work world spend a lot of time being negative and increasing our negativity on the job site and at the office. Right? We don't recognize people for doing anything nice. We're only recognizing all their faults. And we're guilty of that in the coaching world as well, trying to constantly fix something. So it's we got to be careful of that.
Yeah, and I think as far as actionable items go, or a tool, one of our most famous tools is called Form. And without going too deep into it, it's just an effective way to strategically engage in dialogue with someone that gives them the release of oxytocin and serotonin. When someone starts talking about their kids, their oxytocin levels kick up, their serotonin levels kick up, because they have pride and a sense of purpose in the experiences they're having with their kids. When you have dialogue with somebody about where they're from and what their interests are, it's going to raise their serotonin level, decrease their cortisol, because they have purpose and you're acknowledging them, which is also as important as praise and recognition, as acknowledgement, because they exist. I see you is a good feeling to experience at work. So those are the actionable, that's an actionable item that will do it. So you don't need to be a brain scientist to be profitable in 2023. You just need to understand those 3 chemicals and then have some dialogue, have some effective communication, as we mentioned earlier.
Correct. We don't, it doesn't matter what business we all think we're in. It does not matter. You are all in the people business. We are all in the people business. We are in the business of coaching and being coached, period. And it's that elementary to me and that simple. And it doesn't matter to me what you're selling. I don't care if you're selling cars or making big rocks and little rocks at the mine operation. The connectivity piece is a key component, and understand that we're in the people business, we're working with people, and them having connection to the overall mission of what we all want to be doing as a team is the key component. You can't throw out the ownership piece, which is outside of a lot of research behind things like the Oz principle, which is where this graph came from, books like Extreme Ownership, around this entire mentality that the leadership team must take complete ownership. These are just one component. The leadership team must take it. That was my fault and I own it, and we need to regroup and figure that out. That is going to create a ton of synergy inside of your group. The rest of your staff needs to take ownership, right? There's a huge percentage of people that are inside of all the environments that we live and play in that live in a victim mentality. It's not their job. They're not sure what they're supposed to be doing. They're constantly pointing fingers at other people. They're blaming everyone other than themselves. The analogy of the guy or the gal on the couch eating Oreos and watching TV, feeling sorry for him or herself, and not bothering to get up and possibly do a few push-ups or a couple of sit-ups, is a victim mentality, right? I can't do it. I'm never going to get skinny. I might as well just keep growing and getting fatter. So it's a major component. I think it's a great hack as well to be able to take into your team. When we're looking at being highly profitable, we want to also be highly engaged, and we also want to be highly accountable. And even if we're just using this analogy of I see it, I own it, I solve it, and I do it, and I hit repeat as a way to kick off meetings or have conversation inside of our workplace. Hey, look, let's be above the line, right? If Jason says this place sucks, I'm having an argument and I suck, we didn't get any profit done. Hey, let's get above the line. What's the problem? Let's try to solve it. Let's come up with some solutions. And it may suck right now, but 9:30, 10 o'clock this morning, we'll have some things together and the rest of your day will be much better. That's a synergy and an accountability and a real life scenario. So I think this is a great hack and definitely something that's got to be thrown in there, not as a big beating stick, but there's got to be accountability inside of the team in order for us to have trust and synergy as well.
Yeah, Scott, and I always like to, look at the long-term game. And as we, get towards the end here, we'll give you a little takeaway on the marathon versus the sprint type mentality. But we're in a marathon, so the long game is, yes, accountability is important. In a task by task basis or a job by job basis, where you have the ability to sort of debrief and reflect and take accountability for things that have gone on, good and bad. But the other long-term piece here is, as leaders in an engaged environment for retention purposes and long-term profitability, is we also need to look at it through the lenses of it's our responsibility, right? So we have the responsibility or the obligation to be above the line. It's our duty, and we need to look at it as a duty or a duty of care to be responsible, be above the line, and follow, the protocol for seeing, owning, and doing it, and stepping out of our comfort zones.
Yeah, but you're right. But I hate to use the word duty, but it's hard to drive by someone that slid off in a snowbank yesterday in upstate New York. Right, it drives my wife crazy, but I stop at every single one of them. So it's like there's a duty to hold the door or help someone out to their car. It's a responsibility to be able to hold everyone else accountable that's around you to do the same thing.
All right, so with our last few minutes remaining, we'll hit our last nugget here, which is our connection and synergy. And Jason, you always have a lot to share on the connection piece, especially when we talk about human motivation and meeting people's needs.
Yeah, I actually got goosebumps when I saw the slide come up, Stacy. I'm such a nerd about Maslow. For me, what I like to remind people, first and foremost, there's so much we could talk about, but I believe everyone wants to be or has some sort of a inherent drive internally to be at the top of that pyramid. And as you look at it, at the very top is is the ability to self-actualize. And really at the very pinnacle, it's not on the graph, is transcendency, but to become the best version of yourself is another way to say self-actualize, achieving one's full potential, as it says right there. But really what I like to focus on is the blue and the yellow. And if we think about somebody on our team or somebody, you know, as we were talking about that last slide with ownership and duty, I kind of, you know, think about my own role. You might catch me vacuuming the space that I work in at my school. So, you know, what am I doing vacuuming? Because I'm a teacher and I'm, you know, part of the teachers union and I'm an instructor, and my job is to work with kids and provide, you know, a challenging instruction that helps kids learn and grow. But sometimes I vacuum. It's my space. I own it, and I get the vacuum cleaner from the custodial closet and I clean it because I keep a clean, safe place for students to learn and grow. So I don't get paid to vacuum, but I do vacuum regularly, and I just own that. And because if it's not being done, we don't have someone on nights that will do that. I can tell, and I do it. I take out the trash too. So that idea of like extreme ownership, you know, we have people on our teams that don't meet the desired outcome or expectation. They aren't meeting whatever standard we have set in place. You know what? We have to invest in them. We have to train them. We have to grow them. And I think that the yellow and blue are the psychological needs that we all need to become aware of. How do I take somebody from good to great, or okay to good, or in a worst case scenario situation, bad to okay? Well, this is really the hack. And it's this idea of giving them some belonging and showing them some acceptance, having relationships where, you know, that are go beyond just the hi and goodbye, and then also giving them some esteem and making them feel as though they have a purpose, and giving them some sense of meaning and value, and letting them know that their place on the team is valuable, even if it's something as simple as taking out the trash. So like if you have someone on your team that's failing, we got to invest in their esteem, invest in their belonging. And that's been proven time and time again through research and books written like the Culture Code. High performing teams have a ton of esteem and a ton of belonging that's just, you know, flowing throughout their culture and all the spaces that they have. So that's really my biggest takeaway. Going from bad to good or good to great, all is, you know, evident upon the esteem and belonging that we're creating.
And there's a significantly large amount of people who never get out of good because good is so comfortable and it tastes so good, and they're already better than a bunch of other people around them. It takes a fairly elite group to get to great, and you see it in business just like life. And if you can elevate your team and yourself to that level of self-actualization, it'll be very difficult for someone to take your market share, which is directly spot on the conversation of will I or can I be profitable in 2023? You can, if you utilize all the tools that are available to you inside of the space of emotional intelligence. That's a key component. Water the plants, right, Stacy? Water the plants.
Yeah, we always like to refer to sort of that greenhouse analogy, where it's your job, you know, as, you know, keeping or tending your greenhouse, and we need to treat, you know, our team as if we need to nurture them, provide them with the light, the water, the nutrients they need to grow, to be engaged. And that's through engaging leadership and the tools that we share, you know, to accomplish that. So we've got to look at ourselves as always watering the plants, never walking by a wilting flower, put water on it immediately, to that greenhouse analogy. And then also be mindful of the fact that, you know, when we talk about profitability for 2023, it's a 365-day calendar. So, you know, it's a marathon, it's not a sprint. So we're not going to, you know, take these tools and change things in a week. And maybe we will, but the goal is to change it continuously. And we're going to use all 365 days of 2023 to continue to nurture and water and engage and increase profitability. So we got to be mindful of that and keep that in perspective.
Well put. Well, we appreciate the time. We always like to throw out there that we're more than happy to talk shop to anybody that wants to talk shop. We're moms, we're dads, we're coaches, we're athletes, we're business owners. We work with businesses, we work with coaches. So we are very coachable and appreciate any opportunity we can to share information as a coach. And oftentimes we have conversations like this offline and we pick up other information that's useful to both of us. So we're always available, always happy to talk, always happy to share information and resources. We spend a lot of time in this space, but this is where it's at. Engage your workforce, stay in the people business, keep in a coaching mentality, and you will hit those goals, which is safety, can't injure or kill people at an alarming rate to stay in business. Quality product. If you don't put out a quality product, someone else is going to take your business anyways. And you got to make money. And you got to have all those components. In order to have that, you got to have a team. It takes all of us, it takes a tribe. So again, we appreciate it. Stacy, Scott, Jason. We will catch up with you next time. See you guys.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. See you, Jason.